Hello guys and welcome back to this API course. In this lecture we are going to make our first API request using curl. So I have here on the screen the website of NASA, and NASA is actually providing some API endpoints for different developers. And you may ask yourself, why would you want to access the data through an endpoint of an API instead of just maybe entering a link into your URL and seeing that information for yourself with images in a form that is much nicer than it would appear as the response of an API, as you will see in a moment. And the answer to that is because when you are using an API, you usually use it in your code to get information from other parts that are providing that information to you, and you cannot calculate it or you do not wish to do that. And you retrieve that information in your code by making these requests that we are going to make only within curl and postman to show you guys how they are done. But as I've said, they would be done from your code, and you would maybe call the NASA API to show information about the first moon landing, and you would retrieve that information from the API and you would show it in your own website. So that's what APIs are good for. Now, getting back to our tutorial, I have here the api.nasa.gov, and if you enter this URL into your web browser, you will be redirected to this page where first of all you can see that you need an API key. If you scroll a bit and you see different APIs that they are providing different endpoints, so for example the space weather database of notifications, knowledge and information, and here for example an endpoint is the coronal mass ejection. And here you can see that as an argument you need the API key, which is provided in this section after you enter your first, last name, also email, and if you are actually working on an application or a website that will be using this URL, you might as well enter it, but it is optional because some people maybe only do these to maybe understand APIs or just retrieve some information from them. So after I showed you that, we clearly see some steps into making an API call. So first of all, we need to provide here first name and last name, and then email. So I'm going to do that right quick. And then when we click sign up, you can see that the API key that is provided to us is this one. So we might as well copy it now, and you see that it also takes us furthermore with some instructions and tells us that we can start to use this key to make different requests to their web service. And we need to simply pass this key in the URL when making a web request, and they even make a simple example request here. Now, if we copy this and then add curl in front of it, we can make a request to the APOD endpoint of the API of NASA. So as you can see, the APOD is the astronomy picture of the day. And for example, this is one of them. And you can see that it can also take different parameters, but it needs the API key. So we actually copied this endpoint from before that it was provided by them when we entered our credentials. So now getting into the how we can actually make the request, we can switch on to a command line that I opened in administrator mode. But if you are on macOS or Ubuntu, you can open your terminal, and after that, after you make sure your curl is installed, you can go ahead and type curl and then write the API endpoint, but also followed by your key. And when you click on enter, you can see that we get some informations in our response here, and that is in the JSON type scripting. And you can see that it takes us to the copyright of the picture, which is this guy called Nick Zimanek, I think is pronounced. Then the date of the picture when it was taken, and then the explanation of the picture. We can also get some other stuff like the title, the URL, which we can copy from here, and I think it will take us to the actual picture. And you can see that this is the astronomical picture of the day. Now, this is a pretty simple way in which you can access the endpoint of an API. And as I said, you can, just like you did this query parameter of the API key, you can actually type another question mark, then date, and then equals, and then write a specific date from which you want to retrieve the astronomic picture of that day, or an array of them with the start date and the end date. Then, of course, the API key, as I've said, and then some other query parameters as well that you can sneak in after this endpoint is finished, so after the APOD. So this was about it. As I've said, there are usually some extra steps when you are trying to call an API, and you can, and those being some tokens that needs to be exchanged within you and the server that you are trying to make the request to, just so that server makes sure you are trying to access the information in your rights. So just like the API key was here, the token process is a bit more complicated and we will not get into it here, but I have another course that is only about the OAuth process that handles these tokens within the APIs. So this was about how you can make a simple request with curl in your on your personal machine. But in the next lecture, we are going to also take a look on how you can make this request within a new program that's called Postman. And if you are wondering why would you want to do that, it's because that program will show you more details about your request and more options regarding it, like the HTTP verb you want to call your API with, and all these informations will be formatted within text box, and it will be much easier to read by you, and also many more other options that we will see in the next lecture, as I've said. So I really hope you guys got something useful out of this lecture, and I hope you are a step closer to calling an API in within your own web application, or even just closer to understanding how exactly you can manipulate APIs, call them, and what they actually are. Thank you very much for sticking with me up to the end of this lecture, and I really look forward to see you guys in the next one.